Imagine you've spent an hour negotiating with David Sachs. The conversation flows, he asks questions, he even engages with the ideas, and he never raises his voice, never shuts you down, never signals hostility. After you meet him, you walk out believing you've made some progress, but contrary to your belief, you've made none. The negotiation closed 10 minutes in, while you were still presenting. That is the David Sachs trap. It's not that he's difficult, it's that he's easy to misread entirely. Start with David Sachs' hardware. His facial structure is relatively dilated. It's broad, soft-edged, with a fleshy midface development and low compression overall. Traditional morphology is going to typically correlate this with outward energy, environmental receptivity, and a lower threshold for social engagement. The instinctive read here would be openness, approachability, and someone who considers input before deciding. This read is unfortunately too surface level, and it's actually a trap. A more advanced physiognomist might notice that Sachs' upper cerebral zone is well developed, indicating that his primary processing driver is abstract and systemic, not relational. The eyes are moderately deep set and calculating, indicating that he is running an internal assessment that the exterior expression does not reveal. Here is what that combination actually produces: a subject whose facial architecture projects accessibility, while his cognitive architecture operates on an entirely closed decision system. He is not evaluating your relationship or standing with him. He is evaluating your inputs against a pre-existing internal mental model. If your inputs fit this model, his mental model, they register. If they do not, he immediately discards them without friction, without signal, and without any warning. The public sees a measured, reasonable intellectual, but the behavioral record describes something much more structured. David Sachs is an operator who converts every single interaction into a data extraction sequence, and who does not need to signal disagreement to arrive at a negative conclusion. Now, cross-reference that morphology against what Sachs actually does under pressure, and the picture becomes much more precise. In high-stakes debates, whether interviews, public policy disputes, or documented VC negotiations, Sachs does not escalate overtly. He narrows the subject. He isolates the unsupported premise, removes the emotional scaffolding, and he reduces their argument to what can and cannot be measured. He has done this consistently across political, technological, and financial contexts. While he does present as calm, he is certainly not flexible. The contradiction worth noting is that, contrary to most people's initial reads, Sachs appears to have near zero responsiveness to social pressure, moral framing, or consensus-based persuasion. Even though the face suggests a collaborative processor, the behavioral pattern describes that he is empirical. Obviously, it's better to go off of a behavioral record than morphological indicators when developing influence vectors. Operationally, extended conversation does not build influence with this kind of behavioral profile. It only provides data, and if the data you are generating is low signal, like it appeals to relationships, emotional stakes, or a general vision, you are not building a strong case, and instead you're getting negatively classified by David. These three mistakes are not just mistakes operators make with David Sachs. These are mistakes that people make with the David Sachs archetype. It could be their boss or a prospect. You want to make sure that you're not making these mistakes. The first is the rapport investment. You might establish a history with someone like Sachs, recurring conversations and intellectual exchange, you're visibly accessing his network. You might be tempted to interpret that accumulation as relational equity. Then just one interaction produces a weak input, an unsupported claim, a metric without a baseline, an emotional appeal, and the classification shifts permanently. The rapport was never the asset. The quality of your inputs was. The second mistake is receptivity misread. Sachs asks questions, he lets you continue, and generally he does not interrupt. Standard social processing interprets this as engagement moving toward agreement. With this architecture though, questions are extraction tools. They are not signals of openness. By the time the questions stop, the decision has already been made, and you cannot tell the difference from inside the conversation. The third mistake is moral framing. Bringing David Sachs an argument built on shared values, team consequences, or social legitimacy is the fastest way to lose the room. He does not interpret moral consensus as persuasion. He interprets it as an attempt to substitute social pressure for empirical argument. The stronger the moral framing, the more likely you trigger skepticism rather than agreement. With this profile, consensus language is a threat signal, not a trust signal. Now, before the tactical breakdown, if you are recognizing this pattern in someone that you deal with regularly, the free behavioral brief in the description maps the 4 foundational processing architectures. Every single person defaults to one of these 4 under pressure. The brief is a PDF. It immediately delivers to your inbox with no cost. The link is below. Here are 3 counter moves, successful strategies that should, when executed properly, gain you influence with this kind of target if they're similar to David Sacks. Each one runs against instinct. First, you want to open with your weakest variable, not your strongest. You want to name a specific unresolved gap in your own proposal before he locates it, not as an apology, but as a data point. Here's an example sentence. The historical baseline for this model is thin. Here is the comparable we are working from, and here is its limitation. This move does 2 things at the same time. Firstly, it demonstrates that you operate with the same empirical skepticism that he does. Secondly, it removes the primary tool he uses to dismiss arguments, the unsupported claim that you don't know he's already identified. Now his filtration mechanism has nothing, or at least far less, to catch. The interaction should now shift from assessment to analysis. Second, you want to structure the decision before you enter the room. Sacks defaults to building decision architecture when inputs are ambiguous. If you arrive without structure, he constructs one, and you have no control over its parameters. If you arrive with a pre-built framework, specific options, defined variables, measurable outcomes, you force the conversation inside a structure you designed. He will still interrogate it, but now you have chosen the terrain. Third, disengage from the outcome visibly. The moment you demonstrate investment in a particular conclusion, you have introduced a bias that he can use to discount your inputs. Operators who present data without apparent attachment to how it resolves register as higher credibility sources. It might sound counterintuitive because you might instinctually want to signal conviction, but with a David Sacks archetype, conviction is perceived as confirmation bias. Detachment reads as rigor. So simply state your case and let the conclusion emerge from the structure. Do not try to close it for him. To conclude, I must warn you that this playbook taken into the wrong room on a wrong target personality with a different operating system, you're going to generate the exact resistance that you're trying to avoid. What gains influence with a David Sacks will destabilize a different target who's running on tribal consensus. Conversely, what works on someone who processes things more emotionally is going to land as cold aggression here. When the stakes are real, this level of precision is not optional, it is a must. That's why the newly available Strata protocol extracts the exact behavioral fingerprint of any specific individual of your choosing from your environment. We synthesize morphological structure, documented behavioral patterns, pressure responses, all into a tactical PDF delivered within 48 hours, tailored to your custom context of your choice. Submit your target at the link in the description below or at strataintel.io.